UFC 280, Abu Dhabi, Oliveira, Makhachev is upon us, and I'm going to give my full card predictions and breakdowns, and I've never been this excited for an entire card. The last time I've ever felt this excited for a main event was UFC 229, and although nothing will ever compare to the intensity and the buildup that we got for Conor and Khabib, this is the next best thing. There is no real heat between these guys. There's no like intense rivalry, passionate hatred like Khabib and Conor had. That being said, from a purely competitive standpoint, from a pure sports and athletic competitive standpoint, nothing has ever come close to this one, Oliveira and Makhachev. And I just can't wait. And the card for UFC 280 is much more stacked than the card for UFC 229. I mean, the prelims on UFC 280 is basically a strong fight night main card. Given that we just got Araujo and Grasso, which in my opinion should never even be a prelims on a fight night, this is what we're getting. I mean, the prelims are stacked. We have a Goliath main card, and I'm going to give my predictions. I just can't wait for this fight. I mean, look at this. Oliveira, Makhachev, Aljamain, Sterling, TJ Dillashaw, Petr Yan, Sean O'Malley, Dariush, Mateusz, Gamrot. And then we got Belal Muhammad, Sean Brady, Makhmud, Caio Borralho, Volkan, Oezdemir, Nikita, Krylov. I mean, this as a fight night would be strong. This would be a strong fight night. Muhammad, Mokaev, Malcolm Gordon, and that is where we are going to start with the predictions. So first fight on the prelims, we got Karol Rosa and Lina Länsberg. Now this is a sleeper fight. This is the real fans' main event. I mean, Lina Länsberg, Karol Rosa. I mean, these two women get in the cage every single time. They show up. They, go ahead and do what they need to do in the octagon. And they do it time and time again. I mean, these two women show up to fight on prelims, on main cards. I personally have never seen them fight because I'd probably just go to the bathroom. But I mean, these two women are the epitome of just people that compete in the sport. And it's a big fight. Lina Länsberg, Karol Rosa. It's just amazing matchup. Just what a matchup. I don't know who I'm going to pick. And I'm not even going to watch this one because it's just too much of a big fight for me. I'll probably be cooking something, probably making a meal, before I watch Muhammad Mokaev and Malcolm Gordon. So let's get down to business. Muhammad Mokaev, Malcolm Gordon. I love this, man. I love that Muhammad Mokaev is taking on a veteran like Malcolm Gordon. But I'm afraid to say this for anyone who is, a Malcolm Gordon fan. I don't know if there are any Malcolm Gordon fans, maybe just his family members or whatever. But it's the classic case of feeding the old veteran, the old dog, Malcolm Gordon, to the young and up-and-coming, hungry lion, Muhammad Mokaev. And I think that we are really going to see Muhammad Mokaev get a finish, and it'll be a brutal finish. I'm going to pick Muhammad Mokaev by first round submission. I think he's going to rock Malcolm Gordon. In his UFC debut, he landed a beautiful flying knee. I think it was Cody Durden. And I think that Muhammad Mokaev's got some really good striking. He's very explosive. Both men are because they're flyweights, and flyweights are just really fast and explosive. But I think Muhammad Mokaev is probably going to go out there. He's going to be the faster guy. He's going to be the more durable guy. And I think he's just going to be one step ahead of a guy like Malcolm Gordon. I mean, Muhammad Mokaev is representing that next wave of MMA fighters. And just a different level of skill. Again, it's just the new generation that's going to come out and take these older guys out. These older guys, they've been going through the motions. And when you have a guy like Muhammad Mokaev on the come up, that's a guy that's one hell of a tough matchup. So I think he's going to finish and submit Malcolm Gordon. He's going to be the stronger man. He's going to be the better grappler. And I think he'll just be too much. We've seen this before, these young up-and-coming guys who are just super well-rounded, high level of grappling, and they just eat all of these veterans up that are outside the rankings. Until they get to the rankings, I don't think he's going to be tested. So next fight, AJ Dobsen, Armen Petrosyan. I'm going to go with Armen Petrosyan by decision. I think he's going to be able to, wrestle. I think he's going to be able to clinch with AJ Dobsen. AJ Dobsen is a pretty good striker. I'll give him that. He has a chance to knock out Armen Petrosyan, but I just think Armen Petrosyan is going to win this one by decision. I think he's got a better fight IQ. AJ Dobsen doesn't really make great decisions in the octagon. He tends to not really manage his gas tank that well. So I'm going to go with Armen Petrosyan by decision. No finish there. Now, Abubakar, the old man, Nurmagomedov versus Gadzhi, Omargadzhiev. I'm going to pick Omargadzhiev. I think he's going to get a decision win over Abubakar. Now, Abubakar, again, these guys saying, well, look at Islam. He trains with Khabib. This is a guy that's been trained by Khabib. Man, he's ready, man. He's got that next level grappling. Well, Abubakar is an example of a guy who's been training with Khabib his whole life, and he sucks. He's not very good. He's very basic. And I think he loses. I don't even think he would be in the UFC if it weren't for Khabib. So I think he's going to lose, man. I could see Gadzhi or Omargadzhiev getting a decision win. And this is another reason why I think Islam Makhachev is a little overhyped. Just because he trains with Khabib doesn't mean he's going to be the next world beater. Khabib on the come-up dominated guys within the top 10. Edson Barboza, RDA, he dominated Michael Johnson. I mean, Khabib had some good wins with top-ranked guys, which Islam doesn't. And it just leads me to believe that, there are guys that are just special. Not everyone that, Charles Oliveira trains with is going to be a fucking world champion. And that's just the same for Khabib. Khabib is a special guy. Every once in a while, you have special athletes come around that are just so talented and so physically gifted, and everything just clicks. Abubakar Nurmagomedov is not an example of that. He is going to probably get his ass whooped for 3 rounds. It's going to be a bit of a slow fight, and I'm looking forward to it. He looks like Khabib. I think they're brothers, man. So Zubaira Tukhugov versus Lucas Almeida. Again, Zubaira, classic example of just a guy who's trains with Khabib and just isn't going to be a world beater. He's never going to be a champion. He's just decent. Does he deserve to be in the UFC? Yeah, I think he's good enough to be in the UFC, but man, Lucas Almeida is a tough guy. It's a tough matchup, and I think he's going to finish Zubaira Tukhugov. I really do. But Zubaira Tukhugov's got decent stand-up. He's a good grappler. He's got good cardio. But, I mean, he got picked apart and whooped up by Hakeem Dawodu, who isn't that great. I just think Lucas Almeida is a little more dangerous on the feet. I think he's got a little more pop. He's got a little more power. I think he's a good underdog. So I think just because he's the underdog, I'll roll with him. But, Zubaira Tukhugov, if you're not a betting man, I think you might pick him to win by decision. But yeah, Volkan Oezdemir, Nikita Krylov. I'm picking Nikita Krylov by finish. I think Volkan Oezdemir is super overrated. Nikita Krylov really impressed last time. He viciously knocked out Alexander Gustafsson, who these days is basically a can. I mean, Gustafsson losing to Anthony Smith and then losing to Fabricio Verdum. I mean, how are you losing to Fabricio Verdum? He's been losing a lot. And now Nikita Krylov is still really good. He got submitted by Paul Craig at UFC London earlier this year. But I think Nikita Krylov maybe 8 out of 10 times beats Paul Craig. I think he's going to really put it on Volkan Oezdemir. Maybe take him down, ground and pound him. He's got great striking, big power. Now Volkan Oezdemir does too, but he's kind of just a big oaf in the octagon. He isn't really that skilled. I don't even know how he's still in the top 10 of light heavyweight. I mean, outside of the top 5, light heavyweight isn't that great. I think Volkan Oezdemir, his chin has been degraded. I think he's going to lose this matchup. I really do. I think Nikita Krylov is going to knock him out. I think Nikita Krylov's tougher than him. He's probably got the better grappling, and it's going to be a stand-up fight. Now, I think it's going to be one hell of an exciting fight, but Volkan Oezdemir, I can't really pick this guy. I can't. I haven't really seen anything that's been impressive from him. Ever since he lost to DC, he's looked really mediocre. I still don't know how he's ranked, but Makhmud, Cal Borralho. I'm going to go with Cal Borralho. Trains with Khamzat Chimaev. And even before that, he was dominating guys at the start of his UFC career. Had a great Contender Series performance. Just a really good, strong, physical grappler. He's a big middleweight as well. I just see him taking down Makhmud and just putting it on him. He's got decent striking. Cal Borralho is that's not really his game. I think he's got decent striking when it comes to setting up takedowns. Who knows, he may come out and surprise us and knock out Makhmud, but I really just see him taking him down and just being the bigger man out there, just being the more physical presence, controlling him, ground and pound, taking the back, trapping the legs. He's an example of a Brazilian guy that's actually kind of gotten a little bit of that, as you can say, he's got a little bit of that Dagestani style of wrestling to his game, where he can trap the legs and just really focus on trapping the body as well. I think Cal Borralho is a great fighter. I think it's only a matter of time before he makes the rankings. Who knows? Maybe he makes the rankings after beating Makhmud, but yeah, go with Cal Borralho. I think that's a strong pick. I think Cal Borralho gets this one done. Belal Muhammad, Sean Brady. All right. This is a good fight. Two guys that are pretty boring. However, Sean Brady is probably the most boring fighter, aside from Israel Adesanya in the UFC, barring, women's MMA. But Belal Muhammad is underrated in his striking department. He's got a little bit of that Aljamain Sterling syndrome, where no matter what he does, people are going to call him boring. No matter what he does, people are going to say he's trash. That's just bullshit. You look at his fight with Vicente Luque, he was winning lots of moments with the stand-up. He was getting the better of Luque in a lot of exchanges in the striking. He's got really good kicks to the body. He doesn't get tired. He has pretty good cardio. And again, just great grappling. Belal Muhammad was able to just beat the shit out of Wonderboy. I don't put too much stake in that, but I really put a lot of stake in his fight against Vicente Luque. He looked good. He looked great. He mixed it up well. And you know what? He may even be able to take Sean Brady down at the end of some of these rounds, just to put a stamp on it. Sean Brady is super overrated. He is just so overrated, man. He got pieced up by Chiesa. He's got an awful gas tank. I mean, he looked like a dead man in the third round against Chiesa. Again, getting rocked around by Chiesa. I mean, getting outclassed on the feet by Chiesa. Your striking's not very good. This is Michael Chiesa we're talking about, who's not a good striker. And Sean Brady, again, sure, he's finished some guys that are just barely able to stay in the UFC to begin with, but he hasn't looked impressive at all against some of these guys at the top of the welterweight division, or at the top of the rankings, like the guys that are 10 through 15. And I think he's stepping up in competition against a strong grappler, a really good wrestler. Sure, Belal Muhammad may not have the same jiu-jitsu game as Sean Brady. And I know Sean Brady defeated like some really tough jiu-jitsu guy, but there were no leg locks allowed, which was kind of that jiu-jitsu guy's bread and butter. And Sean Brady, again, just is kind of the epitome of a lay and pray. And he's really only going to submit guys that are not good grapplers at all. And Belal Muhammad has it within him to keep this fight on the feet. He's trained with Habib and his team. And if there is something good about those guys, it's their pure wrestling. Now, their wrestling is phenomenal. Their judo is phenomenal. Sean Brady, I don't see him taking down Belal Muhammad. Belal Muhammad's a strong, big guy as well. And Sean Brady is too, but Belal Muhammad's a good wrestler, and he's got the better striking. He's got the faster striking. He's got the better cardio. He has 5-round experience. I really think that Sean Brady is going to be made to look foolish in this one. And unless he gets some super early submission, I just see him getting outpointed. And I see Belal Muhammad outstriking him to a decision. I don't even think Sean Brady will be able to take him down. I really don't see the hype with this guy, Sean Brady. If he wins, he'll really impress me. I'll give him that. But he is incredibly overrated, and I think this is it for him. This is the highest he gets in the rankings. And again, watch the striking. Belal Muhammad's going to put it on Sean Brady. He's going to make him look a little silly on the feet. He's going to be the faster guy. And watch those body kicks, man. He's got some great body kicks. underrated. Manon Fiorot, Caitlin Chikugian. I think Manon Fiorot's going to get this one done. She's a good striker. She's actually one of the women in the UFC that in my opinion, actually looks impressive on the feet. She looks good on the feet. I've heard some people say, oh, her side kick to the body is like Wonder Boy's. No fucking way. Okay, no fucking way. Just stop right there. It's very telegraphed. Again, like, even the higher upper echelons of women's MMA, they're nowhere near the upper echelon of men's MMA. But, Manon Fiorot's pretty good in the striking. Caitlin Chikugian is mediocre for women's MMA. And, unless Caitlin Chikugian can get this to the ground, which she may be able to, and she's a good underdog bet. She trains with Gordon Ryan and his team. They're very close. She's close with like Gordon Ryan's girlfriend and all that. She's got good jiu-jitsu, but Manon Fiorot might just go in there and knock her out. Caitlin Chikugian, she's definitely on the older side. Number one contender. Number one contender. Can you guys believe that? I mean, Robert Whittaker's the number one contender at middleweight. You got guys like, Glover Teixeira, Jan Blachowicz, number one contender at light heavyweight. Cyril Gahn is the number one. Caitlin Chikugian is the number one contender at flyweight. It really goes to show how deep these divisions are in women's MMA. Like when your number one contender is Caitlin Chikugian. I mean, look at how people talk about Robert Whittaker, and for good reason, because he's a monster. Look at how people talk about like the number one contender at welterweight and Colby Covington and Khamzat Chimaev. There's just so much hype and respect for them. And like, it's almost as if the number one contender at women's flyweight is just blending in with unranked girls at flyweight as well. And that just goes to show how shallow these divisions are, how top heavy they are. And that's another reason why women's MMA isn't as interesting, is because there's no competition at the top. And you're really only as good as your competition. I mean, high-level competition pushes each individual athlete to train that much harder, to get much better, to evolve more. But it's just stagnating because Valentina Shevchenko is actually one of the only fighters that's really good, and then everyone else is just super mediocre. And that's why you have this number one contender. So I hope Manon Fiorot can come in there and impress us, or maybe give us something to see. Yeah, I mean, listen, man, I just, what can I say? I mean, it's kind of sad, but it is what it is. Let's get on to bigger and better things. Beneil Dariush, Mateusz Gamrot. Now we got a real fight on our hands. I think that people are underestimating Beneil Dariush. Now, when I look at Mateusz Gamrot's last few fights, he's good. He's really good on the ground. He's really dangerous on the ground. I mean, the ease at which he submitted Jeremy Stephens, very impressive. I mean, a lot of guys forget that fight even happened. Jeremy Stephens stepped up to lightweight and got absolutely demolished and ran through by Mateusz Gamrot. Mateusz Gamrot beat Guram Kutsaledzby. He was robbed in that fight, but that's a great win. I mean, Guram Kutsaledzby is a great fighter. I mean, if there's one thing I could say about Mateusz Gamrot, is that he has had the opposite career to Sean O'Malley. I mean, there are just some guys that get into the UFC and right off the bat they're fed to the wolves. And it's like Armen Sarukian, Mateusz Gamrot, Guram Kutsaledzby. These guys are all only taking monsters. It's almost as if there's just two lightweight divisions. There's the, highly acclaimed, lightweight division, the red carpet lightweight division, where you got Poirier, you got the stars like Gadzhi, Conor, Khabib, Charles. And then you have the lightweight division that's going on behind the scenes, where you really got these big monsters that are just in the background, and they just are just cracking the surface. I mean, and Mateusz Gamrot's at the top of that division. It really is amazing to think about. I mean, there are really two lightweight divisions. It's interesting if you think about it that way. It's like Poirier and Conor, big fights that are happening, and they're all just distractions for these monsters that are fighting behind the scenes, like Mateusz Gamrot, Armen Sarukian, and that fight was incredible. But let's be honest, Armen Sarukian beat Mateusz Gamrot. A lot of people think he was robbed in that fight, including myself. That being said, Mateusz Gamrot still looked good, and one thing that you can give him is his gas tank. Man, Armen Sarukian began to fade. He began to gas, and Mateusz Gamrot was getting the better in pretty much all the exchanges on the ground and the stand-up towards the end of that fight. Now, there is one thing that doesn't really impress me about Mateusz Gamrot, and that's his striking. His striking is very awkward, and Beneil Dariush is an incredibly awkward striker as well. He's wild on the feet, and I think that's going to be to his advantage. Mateusz Gamrot's got a funky style. I'm thinking of Ben Askren right now, and it's not. And Mateusz Gamrot's a much better striker than Ben Askren. I'm not saying that they're the same level of striker, but he's got this kind of loopiness to his punches. They're very loopy, like they're not straight. They're not very fast. He's not like a fast twitch guy when it comes to his striking, but he's still a little bit wild and unorthodox, and his punches aren't coming from just, basic angles, straightforward. They're not just coming right at you. They're coming from weird angles. And he is a little loopy, so he's tricky to deal with, and that's what makes his takedowns so impressive and so effective. That's what makes his grappling so good, is because the way he can transition his striking into his grappling is just really impressive. But then again, he's going up against Beneil Dariush, who's equally as awkward, but much more powerful and more aggressive. And I feel like Beneil Dariush, he has a lot more purpose in his strikes. I'm not going to say that. That's a bad statement. Both of these guys have purpose in their striking, whether it's to set up takedowns. But Beneil Dariush's strikes, he's throwing them with really bad intentions. He's throwing them with intentions to hurt you and knock you out and to set them up for a takedown. I think Mateusz Gamrot's striking is better for a grappler, someone whose goal is to get this fight to the ground. And that's where it gets interesting. Like, who's the better guy on the ground? I know Mateusz Gamrot is competitive with just about anyone on the ground. I really do believe that. But so is Beneil Dariush. And that's why this fight is so interesting. Whereas the Belal Muhammad and Sean Brady fight might never actually get to the ground in the first place, this one is really, I think, going to get to the ground. But it could also end in a knockout. And Beneil Dariush is 33, Mateusz Gamrot's 31. But I don't think that Mateusz Gamrot has the same level of power that Beneil Dariush has. I don't think he's as dangerous on the feet. And Beneil Dariush is a phenomenal grappler as well. So this is just a really hard fight to pick. And I can't wait to see this one as well. This is like, now that I'm talking about it, I'm getting really excited to see this one. I think I'm going to lean towards Mateusz Gamrot being the younger guy. I think he's had the tougher and higher level of competition. Now, Beneil Dariush has been in the game for a long time, and he's fought tough guys, but he's also lost to a lot of those tough guys. And Tony Ferguson win, okay, not that great. I mean, I don't know. I mean, he just hasn't really gotten any big wins as of recent, and he's also been inactive. And I think that'll be something of importance. Mateusz Gamrot has been active, but Mateusz Gamrot takes time to warm up. And I could see Beneil Dariush rocking him. But, I think I'll probably lean towards Mateusz Gamrot by decision. I just think he'll be able to edge out 2 rounds, maybe get the better of position. But don't sleep on Beneil Dariush, man. He's a great underdog. He's a really good underdog in this fight. And, he's a good underdog to knock out Mateusz Gamrot as well. I think I might just have to go with Mateusz Gamrot. I just think he mixes it up better, and I think he's just more well-rounded. But, I can't wait to see that one. Let me know who you guys think is going to win that. Sean O'Malley and Petrosyan. I know I made my prediction on this video already, and I think that Sean O'Malley is going to impress some of us in the first round, and he does have a chance to knock out Petrosyan. Like, of course, you can land that one big punch, but it's like what we saw with Cyril Gane and Francis Ngannou. And this time, Petrosyan's going to have the advantage in the grappling. I just don't think I'm willing to pick a fight based on a puncher's chance. And I know that I'm not saying O'Malley is as a puncher's chance as if like that's his only chance to edge out a round to begin with. I just think that he can't win more than 1 round when it just boils. If this is going to decision, I have to go with Petrosyan. Because Petrosyan always finds himself good opportunities in each round. A guy like Aljamain Sterling, Although Aljamain Sterling threw the kitchen sink at him in their first fight and landed a lot, and I'm going to give Aljo some praise for that when we move on to the next fight. Although he did, do really well against Petrosyan in that first round. Petrosyan knocked him down. Petrosyan also caught a kick, and he tripped Aljamain Sterling. And if it's not Aljamain Sterling in that position, a guy who's got such dangerous grappling and jiu-jitsu, and it's Sean O'Malley, who's got decent jiu-jitsu, I'll give him that. It's just he hasn't really shown it in his fights, which is also part of this. Like, if you haven't really shown anything in a fight, you can't put too much stake into that. You have like guys like Gilbert Burns who are phenomenal jiu-jitsu, but they're not as good in MMA with their jiu-jitsu. It's not as effective. Whereas a guy like Charles Oliveira is incredibly effective with his jiu-jitsu and MMA. And Petrosyan, I've seen him get amazing positions in the first round, and people call him a slow starter. He beat Aldo in the first round. He knocked down Sterling and tripped him in the first round of their first fight. Like, this guy can win the first round, and people are acting as if it's just impossible for Petrosyan to win a first round. If he catches O'Malley's kick and he trips him, he's following him up to the ground and he's landing ground and pound. And I think that's not where O'Malley wants to be. I really don't. Petrosyan is a phenomenal grappler. And if Aljamain Sterling can't submit him, I don't think Sean O'Malley is going to be able to submit him. But I'd look forward to seeing how those guys match up with their grappling on the ground. But again, Petrosyan, he's got as much power as Sean O'Malley. And all he needs is just to knock O'Malley down once, and I think the fight ends. I really do. I just think it's a matter of, like, Petrosyan is going to find some opportunities in this fight. If O'Malley doesn't knock him clean out, he's going to find those opportunities, and he capitalizes off of them. Again, like, hurt Aldo to the body in the first round. Like, almost finished Aldo on the ground in the first round, and then beat the shit out of him on the ground in the later rounds. And then Aljamain Sterling, like, tripped him. Like, he gets opportunities, and I think he's going to find an opportunity where O'Malley is going to be put on his back. Maybe a judo throw, maybe a takedown, maybe he gets knocked down by Jan. And if it goes to decision, I think Petrosyan is just going to outstrike him in the second and third round, put it on him, just beat him up, knock him down. I'm going to go with Petrosyan by a TKO on the ground in the second or third round. I think that's my pick. Now, Aljamain Sterling and TJ Dillashaw. What if Aljamain cannot find success in the grappling? Well, I think he will, because TJ Dillashaw is no longer on the sauce. TJ Dillashaw is an old man. He's 36. He's coming off of knee surgery. He lost his last fight. He got beat up in his last fight. He got KO'd in the fight before that, which was 3 years ago. The game has caught up with him, and Aljamain Sterling is part of the game that's caught up with him. I think TJ Dillashaw striking was the shit back in the day, and it's still good, but it's nowhere near the highest level. And Aljamain Sterling actually has good striking, and he's super underrated. So I think Aljamain Sterling is going to be just fine on the feet, and I think that in 25 minutes he's going to have the opportunity to choke out TJ Dillashaw. And I don't see TJ Dillashaw finishing Aljamain Sterling. I think Aljo runs through him and submits him, chokes him out. I think he's going to be too strong for him. I think he's going to be too big for him. He's got a lot of confidence, and TJ Dillashaw is an old man. He's out of his prime. And his wins, they were good back then, but I can't put too much stake into your wins in 2015. And he got knocked out in the fight before that, before Corey Sandhagen. So, I really think that Aljamain Sterling is the more dangerous man when it comes to the ground game. He gets your back, you're fucked. Unless you're Petrosyan, who can keep his composure, you're fucked. And I really think that he's going to find the back at some point in some kind of sequence. No, I don't know if he's going to double leg TJ and take him down, but I think he's going to find the back, and I think he's going to take the back and just choke him out, man. And I think Aljo's just fine on the feet. I think it'll be competitive, and it'll surprise a lot of guys that are picking TJ on the feet, because Aljamain Sterling's striking is pretty good. He's got good striking. Charles Oliveira, Islam Makhachev. I'm going with Charles Oliveira, guys. I really am. I just think, who has Islam Makhachev faced? Thiago Moises, who should have never been ranked in the first place, who's not even in the top 30 these days. Drew Dober, yeah, decent fighter, but he's never going to be a guy who's ever even going to be in the top 10. And I I feel if you put Charles Oliveira against Thiago Moises and Drew Dober, he's finishing them in like the first 2 rounds. Whereas Islam Makhachev is, taking these guys to the 3rd, 4th round. And then you fight Dan Hooker and Bobby Green, who are really just as dangerous as those other guys, Drew Dober. I mean, Dan Hooker is washed up. He's old. And then you're beating Bobby Green, who, is just a striker. Of course he's got a wrestling base, but he doesn't really use it in his fights, and he wasn't prepared for that at all. And you look at the guys that are prepared for Islam Makhachev, they're still nowhere near the level of grappling in MMA as Charles Oliveira. Like, Thiago Moises is good at jiu-jitsu. It doesn't mean he's a great MMA grappler. And Charles Oliveira gives guys problems everywhere in the grappling. Like, no matter what position he's in on the ground, he's giving guys issues. And, people say, well, what about Kevin Lee? Watch that fight back. Kevin Lee had Charles Oliveira in no danger. Charles Oliveira was a step ahead of Kevin Lee at every part of that fight. Charles Oliveira dominated Kevin Lee, in my opinion. And I just think that, if you're getting taken down by Thiago Moises, you get your back taken by Thiago Moises, Charles Oliveira's going to find something. Whether you're going to shoot a takedown on him, he'll get a guillotine. Whether he'll take you down, whether he'll knock you down. Like, I just see so many ways in which Charles Oliveira can finish this fight. And Makhachev's only got a few ways. Like, take you down, get to half guard, control you on the ground for a few rounds until you're tired, and that's really it. Charles Oliveira is so wild. I just don't think he really is going to give Islam these opportunities to really, like, slowly, methodically get to these positions. I just think Islam Makhachev is going to be overwhelmed out of the gate. I think Charles Oliveira is going to go out there and really try to put it on Islam. Maybe that'll be his downfall. Maybe he'll gas out and, then it's all downhill. But I just think that he's so dangerous. And he's also got this confidence and composure. Like, he's lost 8 times. Charles Oliveira gets knocked down. I don't think he freaks out. Like, if Islam gets knocked down, like, that's just a different guy. He gets knocked down, holy shit, I've only been knocked out once, I've only lost once. Charles Oliveira is fighting like a guy who doesn't care if he loses. He's fighting like a guy like, you know what, I have nothing to lose. I've already lost 8 times. It ain't the end of the world. Like, I'm just going to go in there and fuck you up. Like, I'm just going in there for war. And I don't think that Islam Makhachev is going to be someone who thrives in that kind of chaos. I don't think Islam Makhachev is going to be someone who can really do well when he gets put in a bad spot. Like, if Charles Oliveira gets put in a bad spot, I think he'll do just fine. Like, that's just where Charles Oliveira is comfortable in the octagon now, because I think he's made his peace with potentially losing, getting knocked down. Most guys would freak out. Like, if you're Islam Makhachev and you get knocked down by Dustin Poirier, like, that really does something to your confidence, and then you're flustered for the rest of the fight. Charles Oliveira almost welcomes it. Like, he almost thrives in those positions. And it really, and if anything, that can kind of break your confidence. I mean, if you knock someone down and they keep getting up and they're just as strong and they're just as aggressive, that can break your confidence. And I don't think Islam Makhachev is going to deal that well with adversity. I mean, we haven't seen him really face real adversity. We've seen him have tough times, like getting good positions and all that, but we haven't seen him really get hurt and have to, like, come back and survive. We haven't seen him get bloodied up, and we have seen that with Charles. So, all the ways you look at this fight, Charles Oliveira is, like, probably the tougher guy. He's the more dangerous guy when it comes to striking. He's the more powerful guy, and he's not afraid of Islam Makhachev's ground game. And I just think that because he's not afraid of Islam Makhachev's ground game, it's going to allow for him to be comfortable in the octagon with his striking. There's just so many ways for him to hurt Islam. Like, I just really don't see him losing this fight. I think Islam Makhachev is biting off a bit more than he can chew. I really do. I think that he's going up against someone who isn't flustered by your grappling. He's not flustered by your pedigree and your name or your background. Like, Charles Oliveira is there to fight. Like, he's there to war. And Islam Makhachev is there to compete as a sportsman. And yeah, and Islam Makhachev doesn't have the same grit, the same competitor inside of him that Khabib did. Like, that's one of the things that made Khabib and Charles so good. Like, they have this, like, competitor in them. They just won't lose. Like, it doesn't matter who's in front of them. Fuck that. I'm not losing today. Islam Makhachev, he doesn't have that same fire in him. And maybe he does. Maybe he'll show us, but we haven't seen it. You know, when Khabib competes, he took Michael Johnson down and started talking to him. I have to compete for the title. You have to give up. You just saw this thing in Khabib where, like, he was just unbreakable. And Charles Oliveira has that now. Like, you just won't break this guy. You won't break his spirit in the octagon. And unless Islam Makhachev can ride him out for 4 rounds and gas him out a little bit, then I don't see him winning. I mean, he's really only got one path to victory. Charles can win by knockout. He can win by submission. He can win by loads of different ways. He can get tons of different submissions. And the thing is, if you're Islam Makhachev, it doesn't matter if you're dominating for 2 rounds. Charles Oliveira can come out of nowhere and just catch you in a submission. And if he gets you in a guillotine like Drew Dober did, you're not getting out of that. You're not getting out of that, man. Like, think about it. I mean, Islam Makhachev he's got his back taken by Moises. He's gotten put in bad positions. You could say the same thing about Charles, but I mean, I don't think Charles is losing this one, man. So, you know, I can't wait for this fight. Charles Oliveira going to win by submission, in my opinion, or first round knockout. But I think it's more likely that he submits Islam Makhachev in the 2nd or 3rd round. Maybe gets a first round knockout, but I'm going with a finish. And if this fight goes to decision, I'm probably going to go with Islam Makhachev, but I don't think it gets to decision. So, which fights am I most excited for? I would say obviously the main event. Second would be Petrosyan, Sean O'Malley. Then I would say Beneil Dariush and Mateusz Gamrot, and then I would say Aljamain Sterling. Sleeper fight, I would definitely say it is going to be. I really think that Belal Muhammad and Sean Brady has potential to actually be interesting because I think it'll be a stand-up fight. But I'd say Volkan, Oezdemir, and Nikita Krylov is probably going to be a banger. Fight of the night, I would probably say it's going to be Sean O'Malley and Petrosyan. I think that's going to be fight of the night because I do think Sean O'Malley is going to be competitive in the first round, and I think he's probably going to hurt Petrosyan at some point, but yeah. Let me know what you guys think. Until next time, please leave a like and comment, and I'll respond to your comments.